Welcome for those of you who are joining us. We're just waiting for folks to join. We have a full session today. We had over 100 people registered for the event, so we've got plenty to join, and I'm sure we'll have plenty who will be looking for the recording later. We'll start in a minute, just as we get people a chance to join. As you're joining, we're going to ask you that you keep your microphones off so that we can hear the speakers. We'll be taking questions at the end, but if you have questions during the session, we'll ask that you put them in the chat and we'll pick those up at the end. I'm going to let it go just a few more seconds, and then we'll start with the intros and go through some of the meeting logistics.
Eric, I'm struggling a little bit to see your slides. Can you put them on full?
Done. Thank you. Okay. Everyone okay if I get going? Rob, Michelle, Ian? Yep.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. As people join, I'll continue to add them in, but I'm quite keen to get going. I think we've got a lot to cover. I think it's a great topic, and I'm really pleased to be able to host today's event. So before diving into it all, I just want to go through some of the meeting logistics, if I may. We are going to take questions at the end. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and make sure your screen is off. Make sure that you turn your video off and your audio off. Type questions into the chat, and we'll take them at the end. We are recording just to make sure that you are aware. So if you don't want your name associated, please change the name on your account, and we can make sure that that's respected and keep your video off. Otherwise, we'll hand over to you, Ian, to tell us a little bit about sorry, let me run through the agenda, because I think today's going to be a great event. We've got Ian, who is the Special Interest Group Chair. He'll do the welcome and intro. Myself, who is from Aging 2, George McGinnis, who many of you will know from the Healthy Aging Challenge. Very pleased to have Ben from Sarah Care, Gabriella from Hope from the Community, Ed from Zinc, and then we'll take some questions at the end and wrap up. But make sure that we give you plenty of time for good dialogue. So looking forward to a good discussion. With that, I'll hand over to you, Ian.
Eric, thank you so much. Thank you for convening and leading this forum. As you say, I'm the chair of the Special Interest Group for Aging Business and Society. I'm also the founder and chief executive officer of Aged Care Technologies, a UK startup which is providing the world's leading tool for person-centered assessment of older people's needs, the leading methods for connecting older people to support based on their choices and preferences, and the provider of data about what are the real population needs of older people to organizations such as the World Health Organization and others. So that's my sort of credibility for working in this space as chair of the SIG. The Special Interest Group brings together the research, particularly social gerontology research, and the business community to create synergies that will help improve the lives of older people and help us adapt to the challenges of an aging population. And very much the framework for what we're trying to do is around promoting healthy longevity and healthy aging. So I think this workshop is particularly apt and sits full square in the middle of what we're trying to do. This is one of three workshops that we're running this year, and following this workshop and others, we will be producing a variety of communications which are intended to influence in a positive way the policy, research and business communities. I'm very much looking forward to today's workshop. Eric, you've convened a stellar cast, including yourself as the person who initiated the Healthy Aging Challenge, who was the initial director, and George, who's led the work for 5 years and now is moving on to great other things. A wonderful opportunity to hear from George today about your reflections, about the work and the challenges ahead. Ben, it's great to see you. It's been a while. It annoys me that you come off screen, but you look even younger than you did the last time I saw you. So I think you have got the secret of healthy longevity. Maybe it's the benefit of leading the UK's most successful scale-up business, probably across all sectors, not just in healthy aging. So real privilege for us to have you here. Ben, Gabriella, we've not met before, but I Googled your business and you, and I see that you're leading the way in terms of a community interest company working to deal with some of the challenges of the aging population. Natalie, I know a lot about Zinc. Ed is here as a member of the leadership group as well, and Zinc is convening the mechanisms for really supporting brilliant entrepreneurs to bring their ideas to fruition that will contribute to major challenges, including healthy aging. So enough from me. I just want to say we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful workshop. I'm absolutely sure you're going to hear from the best people in the field. And then, Eric, I think you've created enough time at the end so we can capture the questions and the points that come from the SIG community who are on the call today. Thank you very much, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy and be educated and informed by the workshop ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Apologies for moving around on the screen there. I was trying to mute in the background, and I think I moved some of the slides ahead. So apologies for that. As I want to echo some of the words that Ian was saying there, in the sense that I think the healthy aging challenge in our community in general is at an interesting point. You know, we have now had 6 years of the healthy aging challenge, and myself and Ben and some of the others were involved in some of the initial consultations. And so I think now that the challenge is over and we're looking at what happens next, there's some interesting lessons learned. We're going to celebrate some of the successes that we've had. We're also going to talk about what we need to do to continue those successes into the future, and also solicit information and input from the community who's on. We now have over 40 in the webinar, and want to make sure that we have a lively conversation. We make sure that you use the chat to put your questions in, but also tell us who you are and what your interest is, and tell us what you think you need to be successful going forward on all of this. And what we've tried to do is put together a panel that has very different perspectives. So George, as the director, will reflect on the successes, and I think some of the initial findings of the evaluation will be shared in preliminary. I know it's not out yet, so George will tell us what we're allowed to know at this point. But I think it's in general, I think it's been quite positive, the experience. And so we'll hear from George, and then we'll hear from Ben from Saracare, Marthapu, who I think, Ben, you can tell us, I'll put you on the spot. Are you the closest thing that we have to a unicorn in the UK? You know, what you've done is really grow impact at scale. And, you know, that's really what we're looking to try and do. We also have a community interest group, community company, CIC, looking to drive impact from a CIC perspective. And I think some really interesting learnings there. And Gabriella has had some really good success, and we're looking forward to hearing from that. And then Zinc, with their portfolio approach, they ran a mission, found very talented individuals and allowed them to create businesses in their particular space and grow those businesses. But they also worked with academics and the Healthy Aging Catalyst. So I think there's a range of perspectives, and we'll summarize all of that and get into it. So rather than me talk, I think what I'd like to do is have George talk about where we are and where we're going. So over to you, George.
Eric, thank you for that introduction. And I suppose it's great to be joining you because together we both led the Healthy Aging Challenge at some point. Indeed, when I took over, I'm not sure I knew what I was getting into, really. But I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and I genuinely reflected that I think I landed what for me was the best job in the world. A mission that I could really buy into, really believed in, a big bag of gold, no idea how to spend it, but a bit of a sort of go and do some good sort of mission. So I'm going to sort of run through a little bit about how we did that, what we've seen, and then come to the theme of the talk of where do we go from here. So if I could have my sort of first slide, Eric. So how did we get to grips with this area that we didn't really know? Well, we did it by sort of crafting this vision, which has guided our work, and actually it's survived some very testing times of the pandemic and more recently the cost of living crisis. Indeed, I think the active and productive element is even more relevant with talk of the big retire and its implications for national productivity and in turn impact on interest rates. It was in fact the lack of productivity from people in later life that led the Bank of England not to lower interest rates in February. So, this is headline stuff. But at its heart, it's really been asking the question that we should all be facing, which is how do you want to lead your later life? And are the prospects actually the things you want to avoid? Poor health, poverty, social isolation and cognitive decline, or is there another way? And I'm delighted that there are so many familiar names and faces on this call because in truth, the innovation has really come from all of you rather than from us. So if I could go on to the next slide. So I think a huge amount has been achieved over the last 5 years. We published something nearly 2 years ago, and these are some sort of updated figures. So total investment now about 161 million, which includes the 98 million government funding, but the industry and investor commitment is almost 3 times more than our business case expected, which is an encouraging sign. Our 242 projects range from small spin-outs, and you're going to hear from Ed later, but they also include, 43 projects with social ventures, and Gabriella is an example of that. Engagement with 51 universities, including really a broad range of disciplines, and most significantly for this audience, I think, an emphasis on the arts, humanities, and social sciences. And 2 novel things there. I'm delighted that Judith Phillips is on the call. We were a truly integrated program working together to try and make that happen. And so Judith's been leading the work to encourage researchers to think about new routes for impact from their research, routes through business, but also spotting opportunities to fill in gaps where we were missing. So delighted that things like our sort of retail project has led to some really practical guidance shared with the industry on what retail can do to attract more of the so-called silver pound. And we were guided throughout by 7 themes, which were really a little bit about everything, ranging from staying active and sort of work and work a later life through to sort of housing and the built environment, through again to, I suppose we're loosely calling it now care, but actually it encompasses everything from sort of living well with cognitive impairment through to assistive technologies that allow people to lead more fulfilling lives, despite impairments that come sometimes with later life. And on the way, and you'll see a little bit more about our approach, we've attracted not just people who have received funding from our call, but a much wider community. And I think we always recognise that actually £98 million is a lot of money in one sense, but for a large enterprise, it's actually quite a small investment. So we were always going to work as a catalyst for a wider market development, and that's the first bit of what next. Our community encompasses, I suppose, in a different sense, what I'd say 3 broad areas of innovation. And I'm going to sort of give 3 examples and pull up the next slide, covering sort of novel applications of technology, workforce modernization, and business model innovation. And I know I've said we funded a couple of 100 projects, but I'm choosing 3 examples that have sort of come from the care domain, but I could have chosen all sorts of others. The Tribe, and I see Rich is on the call this evening, is using technology, firstly to understand patterns of care need and care supply, use that and partnerships to identify opportunities to attract new people into caring roles, working with Skills for Care to upskill them in care, upskill them also in running care businesses, and enabling them to contribute to a care economy that is unmet by currents of provision, and actually going great guns in a number of areas. And we'll hear from Sarah Care again later. We've can lay no claim to having helped Sarah Care on their journey, but another really good example of using technology to do things differently and deliver more value to people working in care. The second around workforce modernisation, and what I've chosen here is Music in Mind Remote, which is a spin-out from Manchester Camerata Orchestra. It's equipping staff in care homes with the skills and the tools to deliver music therapy to residents without the need for a trained musician to run the classes, vastly expanding access to the benefits of music therapy, particularly for people with severe sort of cognitive impairment and dementia. And then the last example, another sort of care provision sort of example, is Belvie, who actually are graduates from the Zinc Academy before they came to us for funding. And they're a home care business based on the self-empowered teams inspired by the Buurtzorg model of care in the Netherlands. And their model of care only works if you can break away from the micromanagement of time and task that is so pervasive in the current care system, and requires people to subscribe over a longer term to this care rather than saying, this is what you've done today, that's how much money you've got. And that's how they manage the peaks and troughs of what people actually need within a care team. So that sort of gives a flavour of the sorts of things, and I know there's lots of people on the call who have been funded at various things, and we can pull that out in the Q&A. How do we do this? And we go to the next slide. There was no playbook, as Eric knows, for what we're doing, and actually quite a complex area. It wasn't a clearly defined sector. Indeed, in the words of the Innovation Caucus, healthy aging is a bit of everything. Companies, it's often, actually, if you did the sort of Whitehall sort of look of what sector are you find us embedded right across a whole range of sectors. So our strategy envisaged this as catalyzing a pipeline of innovations from spin out to scale up, and informed by research and supported by a community practice that was part of bringing those people together that we were talking about. And we've seen this concept at work with examples of some early innovations moving through the stages, getting early funding at the spin-out stage, attracting investment partnerships in the sort of helping on their journey. And for some of those in the Design for Aging, they're really on the move to scale up. Again, really, really pleased to see some of that sort of at work. And I think my own passion is that we always recognise that there wasn't a solution to this, that things would evolve, and we had to take this as a view that actually we'll always be able to see new innovations coming in and new opportunities. So having charged that pipeline, really wanting to see that survive into the future. So where do we go from here? So what can I say? I mean, firstly, UKRI is committed to health, ageing and well-being, and it's one of its 5 main strategic themes. Also, one of the 5 is a theme addressing inequalities, which has a very close relationship with what we're doing. And while there may not be anything as distinct as the Healthy Ageing Challenge, there are still plenty of opportunities coming through. There is one small caveat that we have the small issue of a general election and a spending review that will influence the timing for the announcement of some of those new opportunities. But there are funding streams that are still out there, not specifically labelled healthy ageing, but I think one of the things we've done, or you've done actually, is prove the value of investing in this space. So there are more people internally who will be able to look at things and say, that is an innovation worth sort of supporting through an existing stream. I'd also say it's the nature of government-funded innovation that we would expect businesses to start to gain traction in the market on their own. And for me, it was good to see the Department of Health and Social Care come forward with their menu of innovation for adult social care, supported by an accelerating reform fund, and actually more recently plans backed by a 75 million fund to develop the domestic care workforce. There was also the announcement of £20 million last year for digital solutions for musculoskeletal and mental health, specifically thinking about the older workforce and the big retire. And we're sort of in active conversation with Industry Association, UK Active, and the Department of Health and Department of Work and Pensions over getting that money out there and available for people who want to adopt innovations. And that's all a start. We were really pleased to have partnered with 8 investors who have now demonstrated the value of supporting innovators in ageing. And they will, I'm sure, build on that experience and go on. At the same time, we also wanted to see employers recognise the value to them of supporting health in the workforce. And that's why we've helped to establish the Business for Health Coalition, and pleased to see the progress made by one of our scale-up trailblazers, Business Health Matters, taking an employee wellbeing offer into smaller enterprises. What I can say now, because it has been published internally, it is that while there isn't going to be a Healthy Ageing Challenge, the team that has been running that is reforming within Innovate UK under the label of Healthy Lives, and probably with 2 sort of significant additions to its scope that actually I think make a lot of sense. Firstly, something that's much more intergenerational, because in reality, many of our innovations have been intergenerational, and it's been false dividing line. And secondly, looking to bring in nutrition is probably one of the few things that we haven't really done, but obesity, nutrition, and all the sort of food piece, allied with colleagues who are working on agri-food systems, I think will be an important way forward. And we're just sort of building the concept. We've got some of the team, and as I've said, we're sort of developing the ideas for future funding. So that's a quick tour from me about what next, and look forward to sort of some of the questions later on.
Thank you very much, George. And there's a lot to go through, but I think a lot of people at this sort of time really need to hear the kind of future direction. So that was extremely helpful. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I know, you know, lots of companies on the call and we'll be watching later are interested to hear. But we're now going to go to what some of the companies have done and look to do in the future. And we've asked them 3 questions: share what your successes were over the past 5-6 years, but also what is it that you need to do to continue success? What could Innovate UK do to support? What could gerontologists do, academia do to support? This is the British Society of Gerontology, so that would be a natural question to ask, how we can collaborate and be more successful going forward. Less impact we'll have, but I think it's important to add anyways, what can we do around policy? So with that, Ben, I'll hand over to you. I'll drive the slides, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Eric, and thank you for inviting me to join, and thank you to everyone who's taken the time as well. I think it's really important we get together and share learnings and talk about how we can change policy and how we can work together to try and get technology amongst other tools to the people who need it most. So I run Sarah, and I'm the co-founder of Sarah. We launched 7.5 years ago, and our ambition is to take as much of health and social care as possible into the home using technology. And our mission is to empower people to live longer, better lives at home rather than needing to go to hospitals, care homes, or elsewhere. The motivation behind building Sarah was actually I had to organize care for my mother back at the beginning of 2016 after she fractured her back. And it was a very challenging experience. It took a long time to organize the care in her home. And then we had a revolving door of different staff. And I just thought that better could be possible. But what was also important was when I looked more closely, I thought that actually the people who were looking after her really wanted to go above and beyond. They were very well-intentioned, really resilient. It's just they were limited by the tools of their organization to provide great care and the care that they wanted to deliver. And so I thought, why can't we take technologies that we already see in many other parts of our lives and use that and adopt that in health and social care so that people do receive better services in their own homes. And so that was the thinking behind Sarah when we launched about 7.5 years ago. And in terms of our impact, so we can view that through a few different lenses, but firstly, we have been able to scale quite quickly. So over the past handful of years, we've gone from providing about 500 visits a day to people in their own homes to 60,000 visits a day now and beyond. And that's been a exciting but also challenging journey, especially during the pandemic, but it means that we're making a bigger difference to more people's lives every single day. And just to be a bit clearer as to what we do, a carer or a nurse who we employ will visit a person, a service user or patient in their home, look after them, as opposed to them needing to go to a care home or hospital. That's really the core of what we're doing, and we now deliver about 60,000 of those visits a day. But alongside scaling quickly and making an impact that way, we've also shown that we can deliver better care because of our technology. Every time a care worker or a nurse visits someone in the home, they log information about that individual and how they're doing on our app. And then we use algorithms to spot any unusual trends or patterns and signal if someone is likely to become unwell before they do. Maybe an older person is a bit drowsy, which a care worker could think that they're tired and they need a nap. But actually, in some cases, they may have a urine infection. That individual may have a urine infection, it just hasn't presented in a typical way. And if they're particularly old, they may not be able to communicate that clearly. Our app will spot different trends and patterns like that and flag it to us so we can intervene earlier on, sending a care worker or a nurse to that person's home, contacting their pharmacist if they need antibiotics or their GP, conducting a range of measures so we can potentially avoid a hospitalization. And what we found is that through using our technology in that way, we can halve hospitalization rates or more, which is a big difference because the typical person we look after goes to hospital 8 times a year for reasons not of their choosing. So we've made an impact on their health using our technology, and we've also seen other improvements in health outcomes because of our technology too. Finally, we've really tried to make ourselves a partner to the public sector. So we've got over 350 partnerships with the NHS and local authorities because we really believe in creating a sustainable solution for society and working hand in hand with key partners in our community, which may be NHS trusts, GP practices, local authorities, and others to provide higher quality care to people in the community. And so that partnership model has been key to us achieving an impact in the community across the UK. So that's a snapshot on Sarah. Eric, if we can briefly go to the next slide. And we're trying to build up a track record in addressing some of the key challenges that all of us are experiencing in health and social care. So many of us know that there's growing demand because of an aging population. At Sarah, we try and tackle that by better allocating and better scheduling our staff so they can visit more people in a given day. And that allows us to cope with more demand. By reducing hospitalization rates, we also help create capacity in other parts of the system as well. We try and help tackle costs. We all know that costs in health and social care are rising very quickly. Looking after someone in the home is actually much cheaper than them being cared for in a care home or another setting. Staffing, there are major staffing pressures in health and social care. At Sarah, we tried to solve that with our technology-enabled model. Last year, we had almost 500,000 people apply to be carers and nurses at Sarah, which was a very large overwhelming number, but was great because we could then really address the needs that we were seeing in communities, and it meant that our staffing gaps were fully addressed as well. So we've made a lot of inroads in addressing staffing. Then when it comes to health outcomes of individuals, service users, and patients, as I mentioned, we're using algorithms to keep people at home for longer, to avoid unnecessary hospitalizations, and therefore allow them to have higher quality care. And finally, the industry is very fragmented across health and social care, and we've tried to deal with that with our technology, which allows us to scale, but scale in a way that quality actually gets better as we get bigger, which previously has been a challenge for social care and specifically care at home. So across the board, Sarah has really tried to develop a track record at managing and addressing key challenges across health and social care because we want to be that solution and we believe that technology can help. And that is a snapshot about us and how we've grown and how we've tried to make an impact. To the other part of Eric's question, which was what we need looking forward and what organizations might need looking ahead. So firstly, when it comes to Innovate UK, when I was thinking about this, I thought it's really important to try and raise awareness in social care about the impact technology can have. And we saw that in George's presentation very vividly, because having worked in social care for a while, there's varying views as to how helpful it is, if it's helpful at all. And so that awareness, I think, allows providers and local government and central government to be more willing to adopt technology and encourage that change. And I think that's important from when it comes to hearts and minds and what people are prioritizing as we look ahead. I think another area that Innovate UK can consider is how AI is going to affect aging looking ahead. AI is taking up a lot of dialogue, particularly when it comes to technology. But what we don't want is to worsen the digital divide. We don't want it to be just younger or middle-aged demographics who benefit from AI and technologies. We want to make sure that some of the oldest and most vulnerable people in society benefit from it as well. And I think that Innovate UK is in a really powerful position to shed light on how AI can be used and also bring together key stakeholders such as commissioners, frontline staff, policy advisors, providers, and regulators to think very clearly about how AI can help people age. And so those are some suggestions for Innovate UK. I think for academia and gerontologists, I would suggest that for scale-ups who are trying to build different solutions, what's important, particularly in health and social care, is having a rigorous approach to evaluating these innovations and these tools, evaluating whether they're making a real difference to people's lives in the same way that you would imagine in a GP practice or in a community health center or in a hospital. If people are trialing a new intervention or a new workforce model, they would evaluate it, they would audit it, and then look to roll it out. And we need similar levels of rigor in academic discipline when it comes to technology and when it comes to scale-ups and what scale-ups are trying to do. And I think academia can really help organizations like ours when it comes to that journey of evaluation and research and how we're looking at the different tools that we're trying to adopt. And finally, for policymakers, which I think was the last point that Eric raised and suggested we talk about, I think it's important to consider incentives. Right now, the way health and social care is set up in the UK, I think, doesn't necessarily incentivize providers and people to adopt technology, but crucially adopt technologies that address key challenges that we're seeing on the front line. And I'll give you an example. We all know that hospitals are busier than ever. Waiting lists are very high for A&E attendances, and yet there are almost no incentives in place that look at providers and encouraging them to reduce avoidable hospitalizations or avoidable A&E attendances. If you look at many other parts of the world, many other health systems, they do have those incentives because they recognize the benefit for individuals who are receiving care and benefits for the health system when it comes to cost. Likewise, while we know that delayed transfers of care, discharging people from hospital to the community is a big challenge, again, there aren't many incentives to encourage providers to tackle that challenge, incentives for social care providers and those operating in the community. And so I think policymakers need to reflect on the incentives, particularly at the bridge or the interface between health and social care. Because right now those are two sides of the same coin, but the way they are commissioned is different in the UK. And that is just a summary of my views when it comes to how Sarah's tried to make an impact, but also I think what would help us and organizations like us looking ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. There's a lot there, and I have lots of questions. I see questions coming in on the chat as well. I want to make sure that people continue to put their questions in, and we'll make sure that we get them at the end. And so there's a couple of things to talk about there, but I think, I just want to make one comment, Ben, and comment you made about in terms of the awareness of tech and the possibilities. Jane Townsend from the UK Home Care Association, she and I were on stage for a conference, and she made the statement that organizations in her association, the ones that adopted technology outperformed the ones that did not adopt technology during the pandemic. The pandemic was awful, but it also taught us some very valuable lessons about what works and doesn't work. And those that adopted technology outperformed the ones that did not. And I think that's valuable feedback. When you couldn't go into a care home, you could see what was going on in that care home through the digital care planning. Right. So more later on all of that. Thank you very much, Ben. I'm going to hand over now to Gabriella, who has the same three questions, but from CIC perspective. Gabriella, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for joining next week at Easter as well. So thank you for being here and thank you for having me. So we were one of the 12 projects funded under the Healthy Aging Challenge in terms of scaling social ventures. Very positive for us to be able to apply to Innovate through a scheme that was specifically designed for businesses who use business as a force for good, and really positive for us in terms of having applied before, and we're not necessarily successful in a massive competition against the traditional quicker scale-ups. As a community interest company, we cannot offer equity shares. So for us, the scaling is a slightly different route. However, we are a social enterprise based in Coventry. We work to empower people with long-term conditions and carers to take control of their health and well-being. We spun out of research at Coventry University. We were set up by a professor and 4 community volunteers. To see the impact of the program that was developed called the HOPE program in the university and try to scale it and impact as many people as possible. I joined the business 3 years ago. At that time, we were predominantly offering courses in community with groups of people where the peer support is really the building block of the programs we offer. Bringing people in similar situations together to build up their knowledge, skills and confidence, rooted in positive psychology, so focusing on things that they can do rather than the things they can't do. And as it is the theme of the Healthy Aging Challenge, helping them to live better in better health, even though they often live with illnesses that have no cure. But looking at that mental aspect of the well-being and a more holistic approach to well-being overall. As part of this specific challenge, we proposed, we knew that many people who were on waiting lists, and this was really proposed by our partners that we work with in the NHS, to sort of say, how do we manage waiting lists in terms of people waiting, deconditioning, waiting longer, potentially feeling isolated, and how can we get them to better prepare for surgery? We have adopted our HOPE program, our self-management program, combine it with an evidence-based self-management program from La Trobe University, which focuses on exercise and physical activity, and combined it into an 8-week course that is run for groups of people through our digital platform. We've co-designed the course, so we've built some new features throughout the project in terms of enabling people to fast track in case their surgery came quicker, making them tailor their own home exercise based on their own ability, and more importantly, bringing them together in that space and giving them access to the program throughout the whole time that they are on a waiting list. We had 100 participants, so in terms of scale, you could think about that's not a large number, but that really wasn't what our healthy aging challenge and our focus of our project was. It was looking more in depth about the quality, the outcomes, what Ben mentioned, the robust evaluation of what we do, and working with 2 universities to evaluate it. We are very positive to see that there were significant improvements in self-efficacy, in pain, in function, and mental well-being, and reduction in GP visits. And I think maybe the most important case would be the quote that is there from one of our participants, making sure that help them prepare not only in the body and mind, because we often exclude physical and mental well-being, whilst they are actually very much co-current, even for those people who are waiting. We are very pleased to see that 92% of people felt better prepared to surgery due to the programme. That was the impact that we've had in terms of the patients. In terms of the healthcare systems, we did a health economics evaluation, and we've seen a significant improvement in reduction using GP visits. However, as we know, we had quite a small sample, and therefore more research is to be done in this space. As I said this, and Ben also highlighted the importance of partnerships. That's how we build our businesses, to work with organizations to take over for it to become their HOPE program. So we work with a range of organizations like Macmillan Cancer Support, like the NHS, like IH and smaller charities, and make it their HOPE program because they are trusted by the people that they support. And thanks, I think, in parts of working in that partnership and bringing this funding to the table of our partners and addressing a challenge that they highlighted within the 12 months, we were able to secure further follow-on funding with the NHS South West on a regional level. And excitingly, a part of a project that uses AI to detect unplanned admissions from people who are the digital solutions, or potentially also an in-person solution in instances where there is, because we deliver the programs in person as well. I think the main difference that we were able to do within this project was also calculate the social value generated by the project. And as you can see, there it's been quoted £926,000. In terms of that is because we employ people with long-term condition. We are very keen to make sure that people who might not have had a chance due to their condition to work, that they are offered that flexible employment. We buy social, we buy local. We're very much always trying to aim to bring down the root cause of the problem that we are addressing, rather than just trying to fix the problem for a short-term basis. We are really keen to see that due to the project, the value of our asset, of our digital platform, has increased by 34%, and we were accredited externally by ORCA and Kismet with high scores, which was really positive for us. Now, this has made that our expansion of our products and services now includes 13 co-designed HOPE program interventions, and they are the digital ones. We also offer in person, and as highlighted before, health inequalities and digital divide is important for us, and for us is that importance that is not one is not better than the other. Our outcomes show that each of them can help people, but it's what the person wants and what matters to them that is really important to ask as the first question. And if I go to the next slide, Eric, please. And you know, this sounds sort of like a party slogan, but you know, I am very passionate about business as a force for good. The reason why we were set up as a social enterprise for me is really important, and what we reinvest is very important as well. And therefore, my message sort of is under those headings that focus on future and invest in society. And with Innovate UK, scaling social ventures, I was part of the original focus group that talked about what roles do social enterprises have in healthy aging. And we often feel as voluntary sector, we're not invited to the table. I felt we very much were at the table, and actually as being the beneficiaries of the funding and actually showcasing what the impact can be on a social enterprise is really important. So I would encourage that in the future, there is more of scaling social ventures. It is, you know, the way it was thought through using the Small Business Research Initiative, I think was very clever, because that helps us with trading income. And if there are any questions as to where next and how include scaling social ventures, I'm happy to bring the table this time to have those conversations with Innovate UK. But really positive to see a funder, and I think for other funders to learn from, about how to support social enterprises at that stage of scaling. In terms of academia, like I said, we spin out of research at university. We do have a partnership with Coventry University, very close one. We are part of their research excellence framework, the knowledge exchange framework, the teaching excellence framework, the civic university roles. We do have this partnership, and I think it's really important for academics to hear more and more about how much impact their research can have in the society, and the fact that actually it doesn't need the university to drive this, that actually the business can be self-sustaining and sustainable. We're going to be 10 years next year, and even though we pivoted to tech only 3 years ago, I think we're still showcasing that that can be done with a strong business acumen, but with that impact still in mind. When we built our digital platform, we built it as a white label platform, because we knew that building just one app wouldn't necessarily work. So how we work is that we offer our platform to PhD students and others to test interventions. And again, bringing it back similarly to what Ben said, us is, you know, encouraging the academics on the call to test and try interventions. We can do the co-design, the co-production is very important. But I think less of those lived experience studies, more interventions. Let's fail quicker or scale quicker, depending how that. And also for me, very important is that we limit the tech waste, that there's a lot of funding being applied for in academia, where companies do build an app, it never really gets used after. We can do that for a fraction of a cost with a platform that is building up as an asset for our social enterprise, but there are other open source and other elements available as well. And in terms of policy, I think I'm very passionate about holistic approach to well-being. Commissioning in pockets is always tricky, because where do you fit? If you can sort of cover the both, you know, we know employability and people are in ill health and out of work due to things like long COVID, caring and other responsibilities. And I think for me would be the ask of policy is to focus on prevention. We talk about it a lot, but I'm not really sure how much of that is actually done in reality. Focus on women's health, I think it is an understated and still underfunded area of both research and interventions. And carers, of course, highlighted, you know, their own well-being, because the worse, we know that about 60% of carers live with their own long-term conditions. The more they care, the less offer there is, the worse their health is, which has then the secondary impact. And of course, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't highlighting that, you know, there are other versions of businesses like social enterprises that do deliver value. And there's a big current campaign led by Social Enterprise UK, Fit for the Future, which is really trying to convince the government to understand that force for the future, the reinvestments, the £1 billion that has been reinvested by social enterprises in the economy is really important. And you know, we are very fortunate to play a very small, but I feel still very important role in this.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Let me just make sure I've got my can you hear me okay, Gabriella?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Yeah. So again, lots of questions, but we're gonna carry on. I was just going through them in the chat there. Please keep them coming in. We've got lots to go through, but I'm gonna close that and then move on to the next slide. Ed, you've got lots of slides. We're going to try and keep you to 10. I know everyone's taken maybe 11 or 12. So if you go over a minute or two, that's fine. But I might reel you in if it goes longer.
Sure, of course. Thanks, Eric, and thanks all. Great to see lots of familiar faces today, and very pleased to be part of the conversation, and proud of what we've been able to achieve together over the years. I'm Ed. I'm the head of research acceleration at Zinc, and I wanted to kind of bring to life what we do and why, and kind of spotlight some of the areas around that, and so kind of what our path forward might look like. So going back to 2017 when Zinc started, it was in recognition of various different factors. One about capital, two about research. So the UK benefits from being one of the kind of leading centres of investment in healthcare. We've kind of tracked around the kind of 2 billion mark over previous years. But there is a question mark about risk capital. At VC, often they take up investment once new innovations have been de-risked. What happens if we plug that gap to invest at the earliest stage? Second, thinking about research, there's this mismatch between just the quality and volume of research coming out of our brilliant universities in the UK, and sort of why that isn't being translated so much into the world outside. And then third, thinking about kind of talent and pathways in research. I think the stat is something around kind of 0.45% of researchers make it through to tenured professorship positions. What can we do there to unlock the potential of this amazing talent in the research workforce? So at Zinc, what we thought about is how we can bring the different actors together across an ecosystem to do what we call kind of mission driven or mission led innovation. So first of all, we have chosen particular themes over the last 7 years to focus on and mobilize agents around, one of them being healthy aging. Second, we've really thought carefully about talent, so bringing the best out of the research group and universities, but also tech and commercial ecosystems in terms of opening up opportunities, forming effective teams, and also thinking about mindsets and how they might look different between research and entrepreneurship. And then third, thinking about what a platform for intensive support looks like to support this research-led innovation to be successful. So next slide, please, Eric. And we use this kind of graphic to explain where we see ourselves, which is taking big bets at the earliest stage to kind of help de-risk this valuable innovation that the world needs, including in this healthy aging space. Next slide, Eric. And what the role that we play is kind of this missing piece in a complex puzzle. So on one side, we have the innovators and entrepreneurs, often with a research or clinical background, and we are the complement to support them, not just through funding, whether in partnership with UKRI and ESRC through our Healthy Aging Catalyst. Sorry, back a slide, Eric. But also kind of equity investment, building teams, supporting those teams with operational support, and in particular, bringing expertise in IP strategy and commercialization, and building a rich ecosystem around that. Next slide, please, Eric. And thinking about success, not just as, let's say, commercial venturing, but something a little bit more nuanced. So of course we need routes to commerciality and scale, but also that innovation needs to be surrounded by the right immediate team and supporting community and advisors. And the individuals themselves can benefit from coaching and support to change mindsets. So we invest a lot in personal coaching and support on that transition between kind of research space and entrepreneurship. And then lastly, around the product, there's, I think, some really interesting insights from some of the people on this call that we've discussed a lot about user-centered design and the importance of kind of employing behavioral science techniques and also adopting some of the kind of mindsets from marketing and product design to bring aesthetics into the heart of design for later life, to spark joy and happiness, dignity, inclusivity in the design practices. So these are some of our kind of focus areas. And if we go on to the next slide, Eric, what this looks like as a kind of mission-led ecosystem is to join together all of these different kind of powerful actors to create a kind of convergent and integrated ecosystem from industry to universities to individual mentors, investors, clinical funders and clinicians themselves, etc. And we have just seen such kind of great opportunity in this space to act as a convener around specific missions and using that mission to focus energies in this direction. So next slide, please, Eric. And one thing that we're particularly proud of, working with George and the amazing team at UKRI, is a sort of new model for funding. So we've worked together since 2020 to think how do you unlock the best out of a grant-making program. And together, I think George and team invited us to think, what might this look like? And this is kind of grants plus. And so at Zinc, we said, actually, we can help with the outreach and selection and the scrutinizing of researchers and their innovations to treat recruitment as a learning journey. So opening up new audiences from within researcher communities to make innovation a path for a broader audience, to make it more inclusive, and also bring the kind of investor and industry perspective closer in to this process. Next slide, please, Eric. And we are really, really proud of some of the impact we've had here. So we've supported 73 different research projects over the last 4 years, innovations from occupational health support apps to co-design around later life nutrition production and food manufacture, through to hardware devices for kind of post-operative experiences in musculoskeletal and arthritic disorders, to apps to support kind of life science and drug discovery around breakthrough molecules for osteoarthritis, and more than just the impact around kind of opening pathways towards impact and commercialization, of which around by the end of the program, about 1 in 4 will be on pathway towards commercialization. We've seen fantastic increase in diversity, so a 200% increase in female and minority ethnic participants, and also levels of confidence and propensity to take research out into the outside world. And actually, so far, 100% of participants have seen an increase in their skills and confidence in taking research out of the university setting. How am I doing for time, Eric?
Well, keep going. Yeah, if you get to your yeah,
Sure.
go quickly through the three, and then I think the
Yeah.
impact that you want going forward.
So just a snapshot here of some of the projects we've worked with from a licensing model, Dr. Aida Suarez Gonzalez licensing Read Clear, which is an innovation to support those with visual impairments. With the support of UCL, to spin-out models like Irida Health, led by Dr. Peter Jones at City University, to social enterprises like Squiboon, which is a user design-led innovation to address loneliness in care homes through an AI kind of conversation starter. We've kind of addressed and kind of celebrated all sorts of different pathways to impact across the program. And now to kind of think about what next and our kind of asks out to this group. We are, thinking how can we adopt this kind of multi-actor and multidisciplinary approach into the future, and linked to that, how can we kind of innovate around grant funding models? So this idea of the kind of grant plus additional support. So a researcher can also have access to one of our, let's say, something like an entrepreneurial mentor to kind of bridge gaps between research and industry. And thinking about how at a time where availability of capital is really changing and reducing in many areas, how can we ensure that we kind of double down on this early stage kind of risk capital? I think the risk around there is that with a reduction in capital, actually you see kind of knock-on impacts on the reduction in diversity of those engaging, and the ability to take big bets on the innovation that we all need. And then lastly, a couple of offers to this group, which is that Zinc are running fellowships for researchers looking for experience in innovation and potentially to kind of accelerate skills and research in entrepreneurship. And for those of you building innovations, we are actually investing in new innovations in this space. So happy to share links to those initiatives in the chat for anyone who's interested. I'm going to pause there, but thanks so much. And really.
Yeah, no, it's great. I want to get to some of the questions. I think, we've had a chance to go through different perspectives on the healthy aging and how to drive innovation in this space. And I think it was quite nice to have the different perspectives. I would encourage you, Ed, to put that material in the chat, just so people know how to get a hold of you. And I think it's quite important to create that ecosystem for innovation. Ben, one of the things I wanted to bring you in on all of this, because in preparation for this call, one of the things that you and I talked about was working in partnership. I think that came out in some of your conversation, but I wanted to scratch on that a little bit more in terms of partnership. Social care is local authority as well as the health services. Have you seen a successful model that sort of works within the UK that you'd recommend Innovate UK kind of adopt?
So thanks, Eric. And taking a step back, I think partnership is crucial. Health and social care is a team sport, and it involves many parties coming together to look after a person, from health, care, commissioning, when you think about frontline staff, when you think about corporate partners or technology partners as well, we've really got to bring them together. I think that for us, we found that local authorities are receptive to the impact that we're making, and therefore we've been able to partner with more and more of them. I think the challenging part has been when you bring in other parties to have more than just a bilateral collaboration. So yeah, is there a wearable provider who could dovetail and link up with what we're doing in the home? Is there an element of the NHS, when NHS ICB is adapting their commissioning to support what social care is doing in the home and the community? I think that collaborations and partnerships could be much more mature when it comes to involving several parties in health and care together. And I think that, as I touched on earlier, from a policy point of view, I think there is a lot more work to happen and to occur when it comes to bringing health and care together, bringing NHS and local authority commissioners together. Yes, we do have ICBs, and they had one of the big drivers behind that was bringing these different commissioners together. However, I think much of that is yet to materialize.
Gabriella, I want to bring you in on that point because I think you did a fantastic job of partnering with a client. It is part of, we wanted somebody who brought customer to the project, but you really did an outstanding job on that. Do you want to talk about your partnership?
Yes, so we've been working with the NHS in the Southwest. I mean, they're quite unique to the UK. I think they work on a regional approach. So we still know their 6 systems, but they're combined together. But we did bring them, I mean, it was their problem, and it was fantastic of them to come to us to ask us to help to solve it together. And when the funding stream came up together, but that wasn't the first time we've done that. I guess in terms of, as I said, we went digital 3 years ago. And really, it was at the time where everybody was asking, because we had lots of licenses for delivering the in-person program, and that was being delivered in different parts of the country. Is then when it came to when the pandemic started, we always knew that our scale was potentially through digital, and it was probably the timing of it when they sort of said, we have to deploy our staff to the front line. What can you do to support people? And we've sort of gone through that together. I think that would be, we don't want to replicate that situation, that's for sure. But however, it was our flexibility that while small, and through co-designing, not just with our users, but with our partners as well. I think that was quite essential to build that trusted relationship in terms of getting to where we are now. And then very much, building that mutual trust. But it takes a long time, and yes, the ICBs and the ICS are yet to prove to work differently. But in this instance, I guess for us, it was a very reciprocal relationship where we were able to not just ask for funding, we were able to bring some funding to the table to solve a problem together. And I think that's just the way. Like I said, we work on the basis that we can be in the background. It can be somebody else's program. We're quite happy to give up the ownership because it's the shared values with the organization, because the NHS is trusted by the people that it supports, the same way people with cancer trust Macmillan, people who are carers trust the carers trust, and for us is to be in the background. So partnership's important, but still a long way to go to replicate some of those good practices that have happened around the country further and beyond for us, the Southwest as well. So I see it, we've got 10,000 people to support now, massive scale through the contract from our perspective, massive scale. We obviously want to ensure that the outcomes are there because we are really commissioned, because they have seen the outcomes, the difference it makes to people, not necessarily the numbers of people that we reach. So still a lot of work to be done, but I would recommend that investing in the partnerships is as much as investing into the how your intervention or what you do affects the people. So very much important to focus on both and co-design or co-produce with both.
And one of the things that George mentioned earlier was that there was funding out there, different types of funding, not specific to healthy aging, but Ben talked about AI. You're accessing, I don't know, can you talk about what you are proposing around the KTP?
I believe so. So of course being now closer to Innovate UK, we sort of understood what more funding streams are. So we are now investing into a knowledge transfer partnership to look into implementing AI into the digital technology that we use in terms of improve the personalization for people, but also make us as a business much more efficient in terms of the support that is provided to people, which could make us more cost effective. That's the hope of what we would investigate over the next 2 years if the Knowledge Transfer Partnership is funded. But again, fantastic to have sort of able to apply for it and invest to it now at this stage, when we know that, I say, once you go tech, you can't go back, and you continuously have to invest into it. And for us, AI is definitely an area that is, with the hat of caution about how ethically it will be accepted by the people that we work with, is to make the most of it. So yes, Knowledge Transfer Partnership in partnership with universities to make us more efficient and improve what we provide in terms of personalization and outcomes for people.
Unfortunately, that's for businesses that have a track record and have been around for a while, and you've got to support that for 2 or 3 years. So it's not really project specific. It's not quite like Innovate UK funding. George, maybe I was hoping to bring you back into the conversation on around other models that
Well, I'll just pull you up there slightly, because KTPs are Innovate funded.
No, sorry. Yeah, no, that's what I'm
Yes,
saying.
sir.
You were talking earlier about there are existing models out there. I was trying to support what you were saying.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have sort of ongoing grants programs. We have ongoing investment partnership programs which are more for scale up. I heard what Gabriella said about the value of using SBRI, a bit of jargon there, but it's essentially a procurement of innovation mechanism rather than a grant, which means that you don't have to come up with them with the sort of match funding component of it. It has strengths and weaknesses as a mechanism. How do we continue to invest in social enterprises? And what I should say is that when we looked at this, we were given some quite strong advice not to go for new social enterprises, but to look at actually what was stopping social enterprises growing. And we found a gap in the market, that social enterprises that were well established and fit to raise, say, £1 million could do that sort of thing. But there was a gap at a slightly earlier stage, and that's where we came in. So yes, lots of mechanisms, and there's support out there. So they've just been rebranded. So the organisation formerly known as the Knowledge Transfer Network is now called Innovate UK Business Connect. They're there to help you understand and navigate where to how to access grant funding. Also rebranded, that the Edge network you may have come across on Business Advisors is now called Innovate UK Business Growth. And they are there to help advise on growing. And I think that as well as funding, that there's a whole load of really excellent sort of services that can help you grow. And as I said in my talk, private investment is actually a really important follow-on to where the government has come in at an early stage, and accessing that is definitely part of the ecosystem that we've been trying to grow.
There's lots of questions on the chat, George. I'm going to go to some of those, but I want to come back to you there's so much to cover here, so I appreciate your time on this. Ben, there was a comment from Keith Binding, who was talking about he was agreeing with the need for rigor, efficiency, and health economics evaluation. Any advice on clinical bandwidth or ability to funding to cover the clinical costs for these evaluations?
I think that there are a few different ways, Eric. So sometimes there are grants available to support with evaluation. Sometimes people who are working in academia, who are doing their PhDs, have a natural interest or want to focus their thesis on a topic that could be very closely aligned to what an organization is building and developing. and an opportunity can be provided to that group or that individual to evaluate it as part of their academic training. And then finally, it is when an organization gets to a certain scale, I think it has more of a responsibility in evaluating its products properly. And therefore, it needs to make sure it has the relevant team or funds that properly.
Okay, so I'm going to put one to you, George, if I may. What is it, knowing what you know now, what might have you done differently at the beginning of the program?
So that's a great question. Firstly, I'd sort of say we've learnt and applied that learning throughout the program. So just to give you a sense of how things have unfolded, our projects in the last year will have claimed 37 million from 98 odd. There. So we ended up very back end loaded. Some of that was things like we received fewer high quality Trailblazer applications than we were expecting. And so Design for Aging as a program was designed specifically to avoid the need to have a two-stage recompetition, 6, 7, 8 month pause between when you do your first phase and your second. So we've learned a lot about how we might de-risk people and get more innovators, if you like, in a funnel early on and go on. I think my number one thing, and she's on the call, so her ears will be burning, was if we had more time, and we didn't have time, would have embedded the research and into the program much earlier than we did, and make the research projects come much closer to the business innovation. So we've ended up with sort of a bit of a Venn diagram with some overlap, but and a lot of driven serendipity, if you like. But I think we could do more to embed that and bring out the value. I think we've just demonstrated what the rest of the world knows, that actually being agile and being able to learn, redeploy, and keep going is absolutely vital. So try not to be too complex, but actually do enough to actually make things happen. So a few lessons in there. We're still reflecting on a lot of the lessons, and we are obliged to sort of do that. But and actually, one of the two of the obvious ones, Innovate had never invested with social ventures. So understanding our impact on people as well as on the economics of thing have been really important. We've never worked with impact investors and charities. So our research council colleagues work a lot with charities, and we've now got a much bigger, momentum going. So organizations like Dunhill Medical, like Joseph Roundtree Foundation, and things like that are having interesting conversations about how they can get involved. And I think another thing represented both by Zinc and by Unlimited, and generally by our community of practice, that a relatively small investment in that grant plus piece that I think Ben might have been alluded to, I think has a massive payback. And the comment that I'm struck by is, more than once, I've come away from events with people saying, we thought we were going to be in a room full of competitors, and we've actually come away understanding there's more collaboration involved than we were expecting, and value to come from that. So much more than just being a grant giver and sitting back and sort of turning the handle on competitions. I think being an activist investor has been something that's really worked.
Yeah, no, I the support that you give really makes a big difference, and the ongoing support has been fantastic. So I'm going to ask the same question of you, Ed. I know you have to drop off 5 minutes early, so I'm going to put it to you. You ran the Healthy Aging Catalyst. You ran the mission. What would you do differently with both the mission and the catalyst? Knowing what you know now.
Yeah, really, really interesting. I think there is something about prior to the start of a grant program or a program like ours, getting all of the ducks in the row as best as possible. And when it comes to, let's say, research commercialization and research impact, bringing the university into that process as closely as possible. It's something that we have built on year, kind of working with UKRI. And what we notice is if we have the university on board to support right from the start, actually the conversations about what this looks like in terms of impact in the outside world, those conversations are just that much easier. The second is also about the power of the cohort. If you are building a community, an ecosystem, how do you unlock collaboration between the researchers themselves? There is just so much kind of latent brain power there, and stimulating as many interactions within that group, I think, is really valuable. Especially, we've kind of increasingly subdivided groups into specific interest areas, which might be technological, software, hardware, etc., business model, but also kind of area of focus. So occupational health, housing, dementia, etc. So I think those are two areas that I kind of think are particularly interesting.
Thanks for that, Ed, and I know you may need to drop off, so when you need, please do. Ben, there's a couple of questions for you here. In particular, there was a comment by Deepak about he was agreeing with you around the collaboration with NHS and local authorities. They were successful with a pilot, and then Stephen comes in and asks, what advice would you give to organizations who might not, you have a NHS background and you have those sort of skills. What advice would you give about access to authorities or ICBs or health trusts?
Understood, Eric. Yeah, and I think that initially it is challenging. So for me, yes, I have an NHS background, but it was still difficult. It involved a lot of door knocking, and it was only once we won our first couple of partnerships and proved ourselves that we could win more. And so that process definitely took a couple of years for us in the earliest stages of the business. I think that there are programs, though, that really support. So there's the NHS Innovation Accelerator, SBRI, Academic Health Science Networks, Digital Health.London, Clinical Entrepreneur Program. There are a few different programs out there that support people in reaching the right parts of the NHS, because I think that actually navigating the health service and finding the right door to knock on is not easy. And so really trying to make the most of those organizations who will give you a hand is crucial.
Thanks for that, Ben. And there was a question from Garrett, who said, if there's time for Ben, what advice would you have for companies developing business models fundamentally preventative, predictive technologies and traditionally reactive health and social care sector?
Yeah, so I think that, great question. It's challenging, and it's challenging across health and care because there are a number of great products that help people with prevention, everything from preventing people getting diabetes or smoking, all the way to preventing a fall. However, even though that saves the system a lot of money, and it's much better for individuals who are using those services and products, there aren't clear channels for it to be paid and remunerated. That's why typically I think you need to have almost a dual business model where you initially build a product and service that isn't purely focused on prevention and crafting a new form of reimbursement, because that can take a long time and very hard to replicate. So you focus instead on a part of the sector in industry where commissioners are used to paying for that service, and you can slot in like everyone else, but you do it maybe a bit better or with a higher quality product and service. And once you develop more inroads and more scale and better partnerships, you can use that as a springboard to then look at a business model and a reimbursement structure that supports prevention. So I think at times you need to consider that dual path, because otherwise achieving traction can be challenging in the health service and in social care.
So you mentioned a couple of things there. If you could maybe pop links into the chat for people who may or may not be aware of those, but that'd be quite helpful. And if we maybe catch up with you afterwards, we can share that with everyone. I'm gonna pop up my screen and begin to wrap up, if I may. We're going to look at, so we've done the panel discussion. There is support for the community going forward. As George talked about earlier, there's the existing healthy aging community of practice. There's a link to it here that provides, content, networking, sharing some of the ideas. We'll be running more of these events, as Ian was saying at the beginning. BSG has some future events that we'll be running. Aging 2.0 will be continuing to run events. So please come to the Aging 2.0 website and connect to us. We are always promoting what's news and events and links to funding. The Healthy Aging Community of Practice. There's a new community called CREO that's around disability tech, which isn't necessarily healthy aging, but there is an overlap when you talk about some of the things we've been talking about. So that is run by Tech Nation and Founders Forum. As George said, there's the Investor Partnerships, which is run by now what's called Business Connect, and there's a link to it here. And continue to look at the Innovate UK applications. That's not just grants, but there are loans that are out there. So those are some of the ideas going forward. There's a lot happening. We've had a lot of success. There's a couple of things that we'll be feeding back based on your feedback today. So we're very grateful for your contribution. George, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add at this point.
No, just thank you to all the innovators and researchers out there who've been making a difference over the last 5 years.
And Ian, may I bring you back at this point to say anything if you want to just final word from BSG?
I think a mark of a successful business, including the ones we've heard from today, is that you exceed expectations. And I think the meeting has done that, thanks to your leadership contributions from everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, so there'll be more resources available for everyone. I see Judith clapping. I'm going to do a shout out to Judith, it was your idea, Judith, for the BSG SIG. So thank you very much for the suggestion. We're here because of your idea. So yeah, thanks again, everyone. And we'll make the recording available. We'll make the resources available. We'll make the slides available. So onwards and upwards. Still lots of work to be done. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Eric.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.